I will say that I'm troubled these days by the events of the world, of our country and the world, and by the violence and the hateful and harmful speech and actions. Here's some Che Guevara. The true revolution is guided by a great feeling of love. We must strive every day so that this love of living humanity will be transformed into actual deeds, into acts that serve as examples, as a moving force. I'll say it again. The true revolution is guided by a great feeling of love. We must strive every day so that this love of living humanity will be transformed into actual deeds, into acts that serve as examples, as a moving force. Again, Che Guevara. At times like this, of course, it was on our Google Plus also, and I've been asked by others, what is it that I can say to, in this time that's a lot of turmoil and strong feelings and emotions. And, I try to go to the Dharma for the answer, not just my own thing. So I was looking through stuff and I came up on this quote that I've had around right action. Because I think there is a lot of question these days, especially times like this where, like, when do we get off our cushion and go march or go to a protest or go do something? What should we do, right? So from this quote, I say, how do we know that we're acting from a great feeling of love, right? This love of living humanity. I think that's the question. Not so much whether we should or shouldn't, because I can't tell you that. What I'd like to touch on is how can we act from this greater love, right? And by that I don't mean that it doesn't include the self, right? I want to be really clear about that. A couple things. I think that we need to pause. I think when I am in any time in which I feel discombobulated or kilter about things, I think I really come back to the teachings and to practice. When I say the teaching, because I'm very practice oriented, as you guys know. So really, the biggest thing about our practice is we pause, right, and we stop. So, as many of you have heard me say lately, I think a lot about that Zazen is about listening. Right? When we sit down to do Zazen, we're listening in a very deep way. I was at this week-long study on the cypress tree koan and Dogen's take on it. And I'll just tell you the koan, the basis of the koan. And I've talked about the koan before, and there's different ways to approach it. And often it's translated as the oak tree. In this case, it's translated as the cypress tree. Other translation is the cedar tree. Anyway, it's a tree. You get that part, right? I preface before that. Or the basis is, right? The monk asks Keiryū, why did the ancestor come from the West? And by that he means Bodhidharma, who brought Buddhism from India to China. So there are a lot of ways to approach that, and it's a huge question in Zen. In fact, if you've been at a Sesshin Shuso ceremony, that's the question that every Shuso or the head monk, the person that's being introduced to the community as a teacher now, has to address, right? And about the Bodhidharma coming, not this koan, but about Bodhidharma coming. And one of the essential point of it is that what is the point of practice, right? If Bodhidharma is really considered the person who brought Zen to practice, or made practice into Zen, right? Buddhist practice. And the answer in the koan is the cypress tree in the yard, or the cypress tree in the garden, and sometimes translated. So why did the ancestor come from the west? The cypress tree in the yard. So of course you're probably going. That's most of how we all respond when you say. And in fact, I ask you though, what does that bring up for you? In your puzzleness, what is the question that comes up? Or an answer?
To be honest, I don't understand the question.
Okay, so you don't understand the question. So you go, huh?
It's like an image of refuge or something.
The refuge. Okay, you have to make big movements on the computer. Okay, so you haven't.
Well, it makes me wonder, what's the point? Like, what's the point of that answer?
What's the point of the answer? That's your question? Keizen, is that right? Okay.
I mean, it makes me think that the point of the answer is that it's a non sequitur, and Bodhidharma could have come from anywhere.
Bodhidharma could have come from anywhere. Okay. Okay, Norman?
I guess this is a continuation of Kaizen's point. It makes me think, what's the point of the question? It's as if the person answering the question is putting it back on the questioner. Like, what's the point of your question?
Okay. Shelley, you're nodding. Was that your answer too?
That was my question as well.
What's the point of the answer?
I would think what brought up for me was, why does the question matter?
Why does a question matter? Okay. Okay, so what if the question was, okay.
I'm just going to say the question beginning with the word why seems kind of funny, because to me the answer is, well, that's what happened, and that may be how it is, and maybe explanation doesn't make sense as a framework.
Okay. What about if the question was, what is the point of practice? I kind of gave it away a little bit already. Kind of.
Same answer though?
Which is?
Same answer?
Which is? For you, what is the answer?
Oh no, that was my question. Is that the same answer with the rephrase?
Oh, yeah. Yes. In the koan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, the cypress tree in the garden. So what comes up for you if it's framed as, what is the point of practice? Or why do you practice? Would even be a better. Why do you practice? Now what's your answer? Okay, we're going to go around the room and you're going to say something. No, I'm serious. Let's see. Okay. Ready, go.
I'm first?
Yes. Next. Kat is I'm first. Come on.
Just being.
Just being. Keizen. Why do you practice?
It's right here.
It's right here. Shelley.
What is?
What'd you say?
What is?
What is? Norman.
Because.
Come on.
Because. I guess that's the answer. Because.
Because. Okay. Christina.
I practice to be able to pause and not react.
To be able to pause and not react. Anton.
Not much else worth doing?
Not much else worth doing. Hunsen.
It depends.
It depends. Give me another answer. What does it depend on? you are?
Yeah.
Okay. Michelle?
I practice to make it real.
You practice to make it real? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names.
Aditi.
Aditi.
Well, I was going to say many reasons.
Many reasons. Give me one.
Just slow down.
Just slow down or too slow down?
Too slow down.
Too slow down. Lien?
To be present like a cedar tree.
That was a question. Deb?
To settle.
To settle. Michelle?
To feel better.
Feel better.
I breathe.
What? And you
I
breathe.
breathe.
I breathe.
To see what happens when I practice.
To see what happens when you practice. Okay. So, there are a lot of points to the teachings, and here are a couple that came up that really grabbed me during the week, right? Trust me, we went over in Onesium, right? And he even kept saying, this was a short one. I thought I'd be over. So to see how thick this is, he had a twice as thick one that was supplemental. Well, actually, when we have more time, like he thought he would just zip through this and then we'd get to the other one.
Who's we?
Shohago Kamura, and this class that we're in, the teacher. We were on, it has 23 paragraphs. We were only on like 18 or 17 when he was like, oh, I have to finish tomorrow. So there was a lot. And here's a couple of things that came up that really struck me. And I like stories, as you know. So here's another story. Okay. What is a bell is an empty mouth, a gap in the mouth. A bell in space is like a gap in the mouth.
An empty gap in the mouth, or just a gap in the mouth?
Let me see. I didn't think I was going to bring this part up, to be honest. Let's see if I can find it. Because there's a reference. It's basically, there's a bell, and the mouth of the bell is like gapping, right? It's like a hole in the bell is where the mouth is, right? So the wind, some version of it says the wind comes from the west, the east, the north, and the south, all directions. The wind comes, and there's a monk. What creates the sound? What creates the sound?
You're asking us.
Yes!
The wind.
The wind. Norman, you're out already?
I mean, it's the kind of bell that doesn't have a...
Like a temple bell. Yes, it has an opening with a thing hanging,
it does,
yes.
okay.
But it's
The
a
wind
working
still-
bell.
the wind
It's a
is
working bell. So what makes the sound? So we think, right? We think the wind, the bell, or the monk, right? Is that right? So which one? Okay, we heard the wind. Who else?
Constant condition.
Say more. That's too easy.
When I think of everything, like what I mean by that is the monk striking, the
wind, the bell, and the monk.
And the wind, blowing, and then the bell being made in the shape that it's made in. And when the wind and the monk, and the causes all come together, then it's produced a sound.
Okay.
We hear, and the cause and condition is that we are ready or able to hear, then we hear.
Okay. Anyone else? It all is. So, the wind has to be present. So it's a basic teaching. One way to understand the teaching is because of the contact, right? We understand, we label it bell, and we hear the bell, right? 2.0 basically, right? So the mind, in the contact of the object, the wind makes the object and our mind meeting it. When the sound reaches our ear organ, then consciousness arises, and we say, and we label it Bao, and then things happen, right? So that's definitely it. And it does take everything for it to happen, because otherwise, if the monk is not present, if the Bao is not present, and the wind is not present, in that case, then that event didn't happen. You say, or the awareness of the event doesn't happen. Would you agree with me on that so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So now there's another story. This one I actually brought. Oh, I didn't bring it either. All right. A monk asked the master, "In a withered tree, does a dragon moan?" In a withered tree, does a dragon, sometimes translated as sing, or is there a dragon song? That one I won't ask you the answer. So, a withered tree, what is a withered tree except a tree that is dead, when you say, has died or is dying. And so most dead tree has a hollow, when you say, and when the wind, here it is, the wind again, blows through the tree, it can make a sound. And then the sound is the dragon singing. That's kind of really pretty, don't you think, and descriptive, right? So, in empty space, where there is a sense of something is missing, or there's a sense of perhaps things have died, or that things are not as full or as alive as you think, right? Something is created. Now in Japan and in China, really comes from China, the reference. A dragon, and we all know a dragon is not real. A dragon is not a real being, so it's a mythical being. So really a dragon can't really sing, because this thing is a dragon, right? So, in essence, what do we make of things that we think there is no life in there, and where there's no, perhaps, hope, you could say, right? No sense of what would feed us, that would nourish the tree, right? At what point does a tree become something that might be productive too? In a withered tree, what happens to a withered tree? Is a withered tree only a withered tree? Right? A withered tree was a tree that was living before, and what happens when a withered tree becomes?
It's like life forms.
Life forms. A lot of times you see a withered tree and you're like, wow, look at that sprout on there. Or perhaps when spring comes, then you see the sprout, right? So, and perhaps it's also the solar eclipse. I'm trying to connect so many things, or they seem to connect in my head, right? So today I did not look out the window. Well, I did look out, but it was foggy where I was, so just went to NASA and the TV. So first it's, there's the sun, and then what is it that is creating the eclipse? The shadow of the moon. So it covers it, and for a moment we can't really see the sun, and everything is dark. And then, again, we get to see the moon. It's not like yes, they're all turning and all that, but it's the situation that makes the eclipse from our point of view. right? And only in our point of view, it's only 75% to be in this part of the world, right? If you went to Oregon or whatever, and that whole path we know all about, or have heard. So, in a situation, we have to remember that every piece of a situation comes together to produce what is now. And we have to be aware that how we view it depends on our position. Because we can only see the eclipse, even if you were here looking up, we only see 75% of the eclipse. So you have to go to a certain place to see it completely. And all the causes and conditions have to come together for something to happen. So we have to pause, right, and kind of just evaluate, like, what is it that's in the situation, and what is our response to it, which for some of us can seem really like things have become dark, or the shadow has overtaken the brightness, or perhaps the tree has died and there's no life left. And what are we willing to do, right? In reflecting, we have to see what are the causes and conditions that is there, right? When we sit in Zazen and we're listening, mostly what we hear, what do you mostly hear first?
When I hear the word?
When you sit down and you first start, what do you usually hear first? In terms of the quality of experience.
It's always different, but perhaps thoughts or sensations.
Thoughts and sensation, whose?
Usually mine.
Yes. Usually, most of us sit down. It's like we sit down to be calm. We go to practice, most of us, to get something for us, which doesn't make it wrong, mind you, but to notice our experience, right? And that's okay, right? To settle the self on a certain level, to come into the self and be aware of what the self is and be okay with that. So we know our experience, right? That's great. And then, when we do deep listening, is it always by yourself? What happens when you do deep listening with other people? When we do those exercises of deep listening, then you hear others more. So then it becomes hearing what's outside, really listening and hearing, right? Because one, you have to settle onto your experience and be okay with your experience enough. Be with your experience enough so that you can actually hear outside experience. And then, what becomes important after that? Connection, the relationship. When you have a dialogue, it has to be equally, in a way, listening to yourself and your experience, sharing that, and also making sure that their experience is coming through and it's just not my experience. I feel like when I don't listen, it's because I have my stuff all going and I have a hard time listening to the other. And you also don't want to be in relationship in a way, it's really taxing to be in relationship where it's all about the other person. You see? So on a certain level, our practice is about settling ourselves on ourselves. By that we mean to have a sense of settledness of what's going on. Doesn't mean that by that I'm like I'm just calm, right? It just means that there is settledness in my experience, which could be agitated experience, but there's a settledness that I know I'm agitated and I know what it is to be agitated, and I embody it. I'm aware of it fully, and there's enough space around it that I can also interact and hear the world, or what we call outside. And then in that comes more clearly the interaction. So, And I think when we're able to really ask, what is the cypress tree in the garden? Not my idea of the cypress tree. What do you have to do to really know the cypress tree? I was on that retreat in December, right, when I was just so open. It was a little woods. I licked a tree. I really did. I was like, oh my God. I was hugging it first, right? I'm like, oh, I'm a tree hugger because I just love the tree, right? I really did. I was just like, oh, every day you've been here as I've gone by crying and crying. And then one time I was like, should I lick it? Like I just really wanted to lick it, but I had to like go, should I or shouldn't I? And then I was like, what would happen? I licked the tree. I can't explain what it tastes like. It tastes like tree. But I know it more now. I know it. I can't describe to you what it is. I can't. Right? But I know what that tree tasted like. So, notice in that experience, I'm aware that I was having like anxiety, like who would I be? I'm okay with being a tree hugger, but who am I as a tree licker, right? It's just like, what? And then I had to let that go, not because I should or anything, I was willing when I was curious enough about the tree. To let the tree tell me what it tastes like. I mean, on a certain level, it's lucky. We're lucky. I mean, most of us, I think, are lucky. Probably most. We don't know what trees taste like, most of us. Right? Or maybe you did, and now you've forgotten. There's that too. Right? So, are you able to let the myriad things inform you, and know that it's all cause? I was open enough that it was easy to drop, any sense of, I don't know, shame or I don't know what it was. Right? I'll worry about, everyone walking around doing walking meditation. They should be looking down anyways, right? But I had to worry. Nobody was around, right? Nobody's around, just me and the tree. So, are you willing? Now here's the thing about Dogen, right? Dogen, as we've talked about, and it's a huge thing in Mahayana Buddhism, right? If we are already Buddha nature, right, then why should we practice? That's Dogen's huge koan. Right? If we're already perfect and complete and whole, then why do we need to practice? So he came up with the word practice realization. Right? That practice and realization are not separate. It's in the interaction together makes practice realization, right? Practice by itself is not realization. Realization itself is not practice. When they interact, or when you practice, you are realizing. They're not separate. So how is it that we go to interact with situation? What are we willing to notice about what we take into our interaction, and where is it that we can let go and kind of let causes and conditions inform us. A lot of the taste of the tree was water because it was been raining, right? My memory of the taste of the tree has to do with the wetness of the rain on the tree, and the moss, and the roughness, right? So, here's Dogen. This is from the Bendawa, which is actually his first fascicle, and it's called Wholehearted Practice. That's what Bendawa translates to. Those who regard worldly affairs as an obstacle to their training do not realize that there is nothing such as worldly affairs to be distinguished from the way. I'll say it again. Those who regard worldly affairs as an obstacle to their training do not realize that there is nothing such as worldly affairs to be distinguished from the way. That's what I have. Thank you. Should we go around and ask the question again and see what happens? Yes, no? All right, try this way.
Which specific question are we asking here? It's been a lot of questions.
Why do you practice?
I still practice to see what happens when I practice.
Okay. Okay, try see if you can answer. I'm going to ask you again then, Lucy.
Okay.
Try to see if you can answer with, just answer, not in reference to the past. The still is the past, right? I still. You're referring to the past.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me now why you practice. Why do you practice?
I practice to see what happens.
Right?
To be alive.
Michelle,
To be happy.
be happy. Deb,
To try.
to try. Lynn,
Just see what I see.
just see what you see. The T. Yes.
To pause and slow down. To pause and slow down.
To pause and what?
Slow down.
Slow down.
To make it real.
To what?
To make it real.
To make it real. Okay? What is real?
It's a hard question to answer.
Okay. All right, I'll let you go on that one.
Mind.
The mind.
Yeah.
Okay? Can you say your mind? Would you say your mind?
Well, maybe you referred to it before. It's kind of like a synthesis.
Synthesis.
Yeah.
Okay? Unsen.
To be present off the cushion.
To be present off the cushion. Anton?
To know when to act.
To know when to act. Christina? Why do you practice?
I practice so I can pause and not be reactive.
Okay? Shelley?
I practice to try to be with myself and to be with what is.
Okay? Keizen?
Because practice is here.
Why do you practice? Put an I in there for me.
Practice. Oh, do I have to put an I in there?
I want you to, yeah.
I practice because it's time to practice. It's the real action.
It's a real action. Okay, Norman?
I practice in order to properly ask what is happening in each moment.
Okay. Kaizan?
To taste.
To what?
Taste.
Taste.
To stay.
To stay. Fantastic. All right, any other responses? Yes.
I think you started out by talking about the causes and conditions that are out there, the circumstances that are happening in the world, and it just occurred to me to ask, although you might ask me back, what it, how it all connects. When what we just talked about connects to that.
I think, to me it connects because in each moment we have to be aware of what we bring to it. We have to be, we try to be aware, we try to be aware of what we bring to it. We try to be aware of what is happening around us. And then we interact to see what comes up. So it isn't so much what should I do, You know, to me, like when people come on, what should I do at this point? You know, there's a lot of chaos in the world, or there's a lot of hurt and pain. And there are many ways we can respond. And I think for each of us, of course, having information about different ways, I think is useful, and sharing information. And I think holding the question in a way that takes into account inclusive way, and that it's, to me, much more about the interaction of what you bring, and not so much what is the right thing to do. I think when people ask, it's often what's the right thing to do, and it's there's no, you know, remember, we don't practice to find a cookie cutter to like put on each situation. It's much more what is the quality that we can bring to what's happening. So in this, to remember that it's important what our experience of things are, and it's important to let what we think's out there inform us, and then the meeting. It's not this or that only, it's what is the interaction. And you don't know that until there's some kind of action. The action could be sitting down, you know, I'm not saying sitting down is not an action, or just pausing is not an action. For most of us, that's a real huge action that we need to take, as opposed to reacting. Does that answer it? Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
Just adding to my answers that I practice to remember curiosity. I think when I move too quickly, I presume to know much more than I do know, and have a degree of certainty that is often unwarranted and ungenerous. And that when I practice, I come back to remembering that there's a lot I don't know. And I remember being struck once upon a time when I had first received an email from you that had some sort of detail that was up in the air, and you laughingly signed it, "Not knowing is most intimate." And that has stuck with me as words to live by. And practice reinforces that for me. So this time, I realize I don't know.
Another koan for why do you travel to practice, right? Practice. Why should you go on to search for practice, really? Anyone else? Yes. I sense reluctance, even though you want to.
I have a question.
Yes.
Our discussion tonight is bringing up the question of where you believe change begins.
I think that, of course, the other issue is that time is fluid, and time is another big thing, that also is included in this koan, by the way, is that there's this time now, there's time in the past, and there's time in the future. Yes, that's how we mostly think of time. For Dogen, time is like then to just now, right? So this is why the present is always just the now, which we can't, in our life, can't ignore what has brought us to here. But really all this we don't know. So I personally would say that the point of change is not knowing. But that's not, maybe, like, when we hold not knowing, then the possibility are endless, which to me creates change. Mm-hmm. Yes, Keizen?
I want to name that in the past week, and also just in general, I often experience this, and I think that people who have been who have suffered especially from oppression in their personal lives, will get into kind of get on the train of like this thing happened and it's super unjust, and you know.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you just because I know you, right? So I want you to talk about I in there. Tell me the I in there.
Okay, so I've been getting angry and feeding my anger about, you know, this person said this thing and wronged me in this way, and I'm not gonna let him get away with it. Like, that's, you know, that's unjust. And what comes to mind in those moments is like, I've seen these monks and nuns, and I know that they've suffered terrible injustices, and they present this, they have a presence of like.
Say I. You see these monks and nuns, and you say I.
Oh, and I perceive that they have this peace and this, like, maybe what you were saying about not knowing, or being open at every moment. And yeah, I just want to name that, like, sharp contrast of what I experience internally when I'm on that train.
Mm-hmm.
And the peace that, you know, I know is possible because I see it in others.
Mm-hmm. And why is the peace important to you?
I think it is.
Don't tell me what you think. Tell me why it's important to you.
I could have a lot more ease that way. Mm-hmm. I could move more directly in those situations and in those confrontations that way, and be with my mind.
But your mind's not separate from your anger, is it?
Ooh. Sometimes.
What is separating it from the anger?
If I can get some distance from the situation.
Why do you need distance? Why do you need distance?
I guess I don't need it. It just feels very unpleasant.
Can you bring not knowing to unpleasant?
Sometimes.
Can you now? Are you willing to now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Norman.
I guess that I was feeling over the weekend.
Did you just say you thought you were feeling? Tell me what you were feeling.
No, sorry. I was feeling attacked, scared, and being able to ask myself what is happening now. As I was sitting in my room, I realized that there was a feeling of being attacked that was separate from what was happening in that moment. And so there was, so I tried. I think I was able to.
No, you just fought. Tell me.
I felt this double sense of, I am where I am right now in this apartment, and I am having feelings and thoughts about things outside of this apartment in the world. And to be able to sit with the difference. And the challenge was that I found myself wanting to make that situation outside in the world more real than the moment of me sitting in my apartment by myself.
Mm-hmm.
That was just something I was aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized in terms of not knowing, I was thinking, when next week my students are back, and I'm sure questions will come up, moments will come up in which I'll be called upon to respond, act as a teacher, but that's coming in the future, and I can just be open and curious about, what the students will offer and what I will then offer them at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think it's useful to, in a way, remember we build the capacity to be with complexity, so that those two sense of things are happening at once. When it's, for many of us, it's easier to just stay with one and kind of concretize around one. I mean, this is our general response, right? And so I think it's useful to be able to hold what seems to be oppositional and to see then what arises. I mean, really, I wanted very much today to, the thing about your students reminded me that, on a certain level, I could have come up with, you know me, I can do notes really well, and part of me was just like, I'm not going to do that because I want this to be an interaction, because I don't know. I don't know what is great for you or what to do in the world. And I think it's as important, though, to talk about that we're hurting. Part of the pausing is to really take in the hurt and the sense of, this is why I brought in the withered tree, is that we may feel hopeless, we may feel depressed, and I'll say it, we may want to eat cake. Right? I mean, I think for me, responding to that part was just really, yes, I get it that it's all about entitlement and stuff, and I could connect to that part where I just want to just forget everything and just, be my distress, like literally, right? So, and pretend that that's all that needs to be there, and I think we have to meet those feelings that are really uncomfortable, that we just want to stuff it down, right? Or get depressed around it, right? And hold on to that. And then in a way, our practice in the pausing is to remember that it's sitting in causes and conditions, things will shift and things will change. And on a certain level, at least this day, I would say that hope is remembering that this is not solid, or that causes and conditions are always, impermanence is, the only permanent thing we can rely on, right? Or the only thing that's going to happen. And so, is there enough room to hold the difficulty, including any collapsing of energy, and have enough space to say, it will shift? And can I just care for this uncomfortableness? Because in the caring and being in the caring, we're there to know the shift. Not try to make the shift. Well, if you want to try, no one's stopping you. And in our trying, sometimes we miss when the shift naturally can happen, right? So it's not really, whatever's happening, can you just be aware of it and try to say, what else is here? Ask, be curious, right? What else is here? What is it I don't know that's going to inform me? And then move into there, and then I think the settledness carries when you're willing to be responsible for your actions, right? And your thoughts and your motivation. Are you willing to be responsible for them? Because you don't know what's going to happen. You bring your best effort, and then you just know that it's probably going to be some mistake in there. And then, remember, Dogen also says, a Zen master's life is one continuous mistake. You just fall down and get up and try again. I mean, that's why we vow to save all beings, end all delusion. It's like, yeah, right. But in these hopeless vows, there's hope, right? Or their sense of that the trying is what's important. It's the interaction. It's the interaction. That's not necessarily doing. It's the interaction. Yes. Any last minute? All right. Thank you.